Our project is Te Waiata Hine Titama Hearing the Heart Song. It's a Tarawa suicide study funded by the Health Research Council and hosted by the Tarawa Lakes Trust. Ko te aroa te waka, ko roto rua nui a kahu mata momo e te moana, tama te kapua te tangata. Koinei ngā matatini o te arawa, the many faces of te arawa. So the foundations of our project were laid by our earliest ancestress, Hine Titama, the Dawn Maid, who upon learning that her husband Tāne Ruiarangi was also her father, took her own life. Descending to the underworld known as Rarohenga Hine Titama, became Hine Nui Te Po, the guardian and guide of the souls of the dead. Hine is our first contact with the concept of suicide. Whakamate in Te Arawa Rohe is the leading cause of death amongst Māori youth aged between 15 and 24 years. The reasons for this are well documented, and they include current and past physical, emotional and spiritual wounding, all of which can have their genesis in the cellular memory that is passed down through the generations, resulting in an accumulation of historical and contemporary loss. Together with the current social issues, the resultant outcome has been a collision of great magnitude. The aims of our study, which was two-phased, and it was a pilot. In the first instance, we investigated suicide through a Te Arawa Mātauranga Māori lens. And in phase two, we set out to determine the support needs of whānau and Te Arawa who are bereaved by suicide, and to develop a culturally responsive suicide post-mention tool. In phase one, we're nearing the end of our study. It finishes at the end of this month, actually. In phase one, our findings were that a traditional Te Arawa approach to whakamate was compassionate and it was understanding, and that whakamate was not considered an act of cowardice, but rather was viewed in its full context as a tragedy and a waste of human potential. That in a contemporary context, the understanding of the etiology of whakamate amongst Te Arawa people is limited, and the approach to a suicidal death is confused. Phase two findings. In phase two, we conducted storytelling with whānau, and at the end of it, we found that whānau need the right person, place and time to undertake a healing process that guides them from a state of whakamomori, grief and deep sadness, to a state of toiora, restoration and well-being. To understand this, they need to understand the suicide of their loved one better through an analytical process involving open, honest dialogue and reflexivity. And whānau also need to feel that the mana, or the integrity of the deceased, is restored as part of their healing process. Coming to the findings, this is how we went about getting to those points in time. We had 3 wānanga with key elders and some individual interviews as well, which we filmed. We investigated Te Arawa stories of whakamate. We analysed one of our waiata mō teatea, Te Atua Matakore. It was composed by Te Hinu of Ngāti Uenuku Kōpako around the 1700s. And the waiata expresses the song. Waiata mō teatea is a lament for the dead. The waiata expresses the grief, sadness and sorrow of Te Hinu and the people from Te Matapihi o Rehua, who was a young man of Ngāti Pūkāki and Te Roro o Te Rangi, who died by his own hand in the 1700s. Te Matapihi o Rehua, he was a kaitiaki. After his death, he became a kaitiaki. He was a beloved son and grandson of our renowned ancestor Pūkāki. He was a toa, an exceptional warrior. He was a husband, a father and a loyal friend, and he was famed for his prowess in battle. However, when summoned by his koro Pūkāki one day, he refused to step into battle and to take the life of the enemy, who was a dear friend. And so his brother Te Whanua stepped up and did the deed instead. Te Matapihi suffered great shame and he lost mana. He died at his own hand by drowning, and was accorded kaitiaki, or guardian status, after his death. So he paddled his canoe out to a deep channel in the lake called Piko Piko I Whiti and drowned. After his death, Te Hinu wrote a waiata expressing the intense. Te Hine was a kuia from Ngāti Wainuku kōpaka, also lived in the 1700s. She wrote the waiata, which expresses the intense grief, sadness and sorrow felt by Te Hine and the people. It's a process of life review. It extols the virtues of Te Matapihi, and it upholds and restores his mana and that of his whānau, which is held through the ages. It is still sung today. In fact, it's like Ngāti Whakaue, it's one of their main waiata, and it's often sung to honour and revere others in the iwi who have died. It's a window into Te Arawa cultural etiquette around a death by suicide, and it formed the whakapapa or foundation of the post-vention approach which we have developed. It also informs the Te Arawa approach to whakamate, which is compassionate and understanding. The legacy of Te Hine. What we derive from the waiata are these messages: that suicide is a result of accumulated loss, was not considered a shameful act, and in the context of the time was viewed with compassion, understanding and love. It was deemed a tragedy, a result of soulful wounding which one might not come back from, and as a waste of human potential and not an act of cowardice. It does not have to be the single act by which a person is defined. Indeed, Te Matapihi became a kaitiaki and is still remembered, revered and referred to today as a young man of great standing and bearing. And this is someone who lived in the 1700s. Suicide was not hidden, but it was and it is spoken about, and the person or the context surrounding the death remembered today and through the ages through song. To date, there's been limited analysis of the waiata or the indigenous storying in the context of suicide pre and post-vention. So what we're saying here basically is that inside of this waiata are the messages that we can take about how to treat with suicide. In Te Arawa, there's been a lot of confusion about whether or not we take tūpapaku bodies onto the marae, people who have suicided. There's been a lot of debate around whether or not they deserve a tangihanga, a full rights tangihanga. But what Te Hine tells us is that they absolutely do. Hearing the heart song, Te Hine intimated that every person who commits suicide has a story worthy of being acknowledged and told, and it's our responsibility to recognise the wounded soul in an effort to restore it, should we become acquainted with it again in the future. She also tells us that those who are left behind should know the extent of the wounding and be given an opportunity to make right their part by open reflection, honest communication and dialogue, and considered recovery. Healing the wounded soul and the battered heart is the shared responsibility of everybody. Some key messages and learning from phase 1. That suicide is the result of an accumulation of loss over time. We have a collective responsibility to dispel the illusion that suicide is the answer to healing the wounded soul, and that a Te Arawa approach to suicide is one of compassion and understanding, and tangihanga process is a vehicle for the expressions of these sentiments. Kahupō whakamōmori whakamate in Te Arawa. For our people, in our wānanga, our people told us that kahupō for them is an agreeable term to describe the spiritual blindness. Kahupō is to reach a state of grace, but it's not a state that is compatible with life. So when somebody is in the state of kahupō, they're in a state of spiritual blindness. Whakamōmori is the state one reaches before kahupō. So people go into depression, then they will go into the house of kahupō. That's the house of spiritual blindness, and from there there's usually no return. And that whakamate rather than whakamōmori is the preferred Te Arawa term for suicide. Key messages around suicide in the tangihanga process. That tangihanga is the start of the healing process for the whānau pani and the wider hapu iwi. Every Te Arawa person has the right to a full tangihanga irrespective of how they died. Tangihanga is the first line of suicide response and prevention. Our job is not to glorify the act or the person, but to follow and uphold our kawa and tikanga. So let them be judged on the other side and not by us. Leadership from the paipai is critical, from our leaders is critical to putting out solid and important messages. The identification of tikanga modifications that run contrary to the true purpose and spirit of tangihanga and tikanga versus introduced religion. Phase 2. So in phase 2, we use collaborative storying to develop and pilot a culturally appropriate suicide postvention tool. And to do so, we conducted individual interviews with 4 whānau who have experienced the suicide of a loved one. Whānau had been bereaved for a minimum of 12 to 20 years, and we did this purposely, that long time frame, because it was a pilot project, because we were experimenting basically. We didn't want any casualties on our watch. So we went for that longer period of time. It was also recommended by the Health and Disability Ethics Committee, because whānau, at that point in time had come to some degree of healing. So why storying? Because telling stories is a natural human process that helps individuals to understand their experiences and themselves. It's also part of our culture and been with us forever, mai rā anō. Cognitive processing, organising and remembering events in a coherent way is aided through storytelling. People are able to integrate their own thoughts and feelings while storytelling leads to a sense of predictability and control over one's lives. Once an experience has structure and meaning, it would follow that the emotional effects of that experience are more manageable. This said, storytelling, it has to be more than just a look backwards and walk down memory lane in the context of this mahi. An analytical lens needs to be applied to the story as to unlock and resolve conflicts from earlier lives that may have contributed to the demise of a loved one, to whakamate and to put the pieces back together. And the formation of a narrative is critical and is an indicator of good mental and physical health. The process was a no blame, no shame, so this is us recruiting participants. We had invitations to participate, they were all local people. We conducted interviews where stories were told and recorded and transcribed. The transcripts were then returned to whānau for review. Oh my goodness, how long have I got? All right, and then we returned them to the, I don't want to rush this. Review of analysed stories by whānau with researchers. Can I have my question time?
There's no negotiation.
Right.
It's a machine. You've got another quarter of an hour.
All right. Collaboration. Okay, so the transcripts were given to participants for review, then they came back to us. And once we had them, we then deconstructed the story and analysed it using the postvention tool that we developed to help this process. Because we got these stories, and oh my goodness, the stories were just like it was warts and all. People literally spewed their guts. And it was pretty incredible, the stuff that was coming out. So we had these transcripts of these stories and we're going, oh my goodness, what are we going to do with these? And so we set about and we developed, we had a wānanga with our cultural advisors and we set about and developed this tool for deconstructing the stories. So once we had populated this framework, we sent it back to whānau for them to have a look at. They had guideline of what they do. We offered to meet with them, come and be by them while they did it, and so on and so forth. Then we had collaboration, reflecting, making meaning, drawing conclusions, and at the end of it we evaluated the process and determined the outcomes. The final bit was about koha and sharing to exit the research process. To assist in the deconstruction the Genesis whānau stories, a framework and te uhunga, the practice method, were developed. So the framework is named Te Matapihi Ki Te Ora. It's derived from the messages inherent within the waiata of Te Hinu, and it's made up of Māori realms, which are known as Te Riu o Te Ao Māori, the Māori realms of Te Ira Tangata, the domain of physical being, Hene Ngaro, Tamaroto, Puku Ngākau. Here it is here. I'm going to read this to you so I don't... Okay, as I've said, the Māori realms encompass Te Ao Tūroa, Te Ao Takatunua and Te Riu o Te Whakapapa, the world one inhabits. and the sphere of a person's interactions with the world. In this framework, there are 4 domains within these realms. The domains sit at the left-hand axis of the framework as shown here, and the top axis is made up of wahanga or dimensions, which are located in time. The first is kōrero or nehe, which refers to the life story of the individual and their whānau. The second is whakau, the present, where the sorting and sifting and the pulling of the storyline together into the deceased present takes place. So the whakau is what was going on in that person's life at that particular point in time. Their life situation and circumstances at the time of their death. The third dimension is whakahau, and in here we look for alternative narratives within the story that can encourage and rebuild the vitality and the essence of the person. Hau is the vitality of the land and the essence of the person, and they're inseparable. The whakahau dimension looks to restore the mana, mauri, ihi, wehi, wana and tapu of the person and their family. That is the spark, the life force, the prestige, integrity and veracity of the person and their whānau. Finally, in the final section, the ngā tohu section, we identify and draw out the risk and protective factors present within the stories told. The process singles out positive and negative issues and brings clarity, understanding, truth and forgiveness. So this next slide explains the realms, beginning with the ira tangata, the domain of the physical being. When analysing a story, the question we ask here is, what was the nature of the person's physical experiences and how did they respond to these? The second domain is hine ngaro tamaroto, puku ngākau. Puku was the stomach, being, according to Māori, the seat of emotions. So our emotions are felt in our gut. They move to our ngākau, or our heart, which is the decoder, that deciphers and makes sense of the emotions from our puku. And from here, once sorted, they're filtered through the hine ngaro and the tamaroto, which is the inner female and inner male, which are the houses of intellect and reasoning. So we filter our thinking through our hine ngaro and our tamaroto, our female and male houses of intellect and reasoning, which gives rise to our behaviours. And the question we ask here when analysing the story is, what was the nature of the emotional experiences and how did they respond to these? Dimension 3 is Ngaruawahia. This is my favourite one. We had it originally when we first developed this, we called it Wairua, but then when we sat down with my father-in-law, called Ngāmaru Rairino, he went, Ngaruawahia. He said, the 2 rivers that flow within all people, that is the physical water present within all of us, which sustains life, and the spiritual river that flows from the ira, atua, ki rarohinga, the heavens to the underworld. And every person has these 2 rivers present within them, ngā wai e rua, wai rua. So this domain refers to the well-being of the person, and the question that we ask here when examining this is, what was the state of their inner well-being and what influenced it? Tōpuranga, the significant affiliations a person has, the people, the groups of people, all the people that they affiliate with. And in here we ask, what were the significant affiliations did the person have? So here we have just an example of the process in a diagram. So the mum, this was the mother who came into our program. First interview takes place, the story is edited, the story is recorded, transcribed, sent back to mum. Populated framework, where the story comes back to us, we populate the framework. Populated framework goes back to the mum. Together we sit down, we reflect upon and co-construct meaning. This is a populated framework. And if you can read it, this is her name is Pora, and she likes us to use her name, she likes us to use her boy's name. And she's since been part of this, she's actually gone on and started a suicide support group in Te Aroha. So this is a populated framework, and there's a lot of stuff in it. I have to hurry up now. I've got 7 seconds. It was recognised early in the piece that storytelling with whānau, we were going through the tangihanga process. And so we had to sit down with our koro ngāmaru again, and we talked about what's this process that we're using, koro? It's actually working, but what is it that's going on here? And we sat down and he said to us, you're actually going through a tangi process. The people are coming in, There's the whakatau, the welcome, people are coming in. We have a tangi. They actually were bringing, when the people were coming to the interviews, they were bringing the dead with them. And we recognised that. And so we have a tangi, we had karakia, we had the whakarata, establishing relationships, we had waiata, which we classified as sharing the narrative, identifying the heart song of the bereaved and bringing forth and giving voice to one's own heart song. Whakapapa, what are the layers of relationships, interaction, kinships, important events. The whakakapi, bringing closure and termination if possible, and the closing ritual of solemnity. And the koha, reciprocal gesture of gratitude. So this is actually the tangihanga process. It's called te uhunga. In its entirety it's called te uhunga, but we've come to know it as tangi now. We're going to the tangi, but we're actually going to te uhunga, which encompasses all the processes that we go through at tangi. This is the process according to Paula. Was about facing up to all the issues that impacted their lives. She said, I felt forgiveness from my son because she spewed her guts, man, and she just, you know, she recognised that she had actually not been a very good mum, and she was really truthful. It was pretty amazing. She said, I found peace in rereading the story over and over again. I really felt that I really liked that you could take the story beyond into the positive space, and I can think about Donnie and know where he was heading. And this is how I can speak of him to his daughter, my grandchild. Positively, not just the yucky stuff. The love I have for Donnie after this process is so strong, I feel him all around me all the time. And the process has set me free. I've faced up to the things and can now move on in my life. I feel confident to have told her, and she's really confident. She came out and told her story publicly, and she went into the newspaper, she had a photo and told her story. She said, if my story can help others, that's what I want. I held my story for 20 years. 20 years. And this is another one of our participants, because nobody talked and nobody asked about the suicide of my son. Oh, this is Pora again, sorry. I had to hold it down to suppress all those feelings over 20 years spent depressing it. Going through this process, through te matapahiki te ora and te uhunga, it went from the pit of my guts higher and higher, and I became free. It was like bubbles of grief and sadness popped when I talked to you. You listened and you steered me in the right direction. And this is a Kraua. He was in his 70s. He's a lovely man. His boy died 22 years ago. And when we went to his home to talk to him, might as well have been yesterday. He just cried and cried and cried. He said that after it, he said, it's been marvellous from me, down in the dungeon, crying all the time, and now I'm halfway to heaven. There's a lot of relief. I've learned not to be ashamed and shy, to stand up as a person and let it flow out of you, not to be ashamed. The process has helped us to tell our boy's story. The past has been put out, leave it out, and don't start a lari going on again. The mum said, I feel a hang of a lot different. I used to get uptight, but now it doesn't worry me to talk about it. And yesterday, when the mokos came, he, my husband, got the photo of our boy down and started to tell the mokos about their dad. It's the first time since he died, and that was 20 years ago. Having been through this process, how might you support someone else who has lost a loved one to suicide? This is what we also asked our participants. And this Kraua, he said, support is a major thing. We never had that. It's the way you approach, the way you start talking to them. You beat around the bush and you just try and get them to start talking to you. Gee, it's been a long time. And then they start to talk. But the first thing, and I love this, but he said, you've got to get their feeling wanting to come towards you, not forcing it. Once you've got that, it doesn't take much as long as you put it in the right perspective. Get under their arm and hold them up and explain what happened to us and what they can expect in time to come for them. So this is the sort of corridor that needs to go to the people who you've been talking about. You know, this is, yeah, it's just amazing. And this is them again. The father and the mother, this really blew us away. The father and the mum, whose son completed suicide 20 years ago, he was aged 30. They were from the north, but their son was buried in Te Aroha in Ngāti Pikiau. He was a lead player, very, very good lead player. And he couldn't go, the father and the mother said to us, we can't go home because our boy is buried here in Te Aroha, and that was a gift to us from the Ngāti Pikiau people. So we can't pick him up and take him, and we can't go because he's here. But then they went through the research, and about 4 months after this research, I heard, because the woman works with my daughter's mother-in-law, Packinsay, and she said, oh, Marg and Māori have sold their house and they're moving back up north. And I rang my researcher mate Candy, I said, oh Candy, we've got to go and see them. This is what's happened. So we went, and because we said, we asked them, was your decision to sell your house and move home, did it come about as part of being in this research project? And they said, yeah. He said that Kraua said to us, I feel free to pursue my own dreams. He said, Jason, that's their boy's name, he'll stay here. That was Pikiao's gift to us, so he will stay. He's all right down there by Rewa, and his boy is here, and his mokos. He'll stay here for them. I can go home now. I want to be part of my marae and help them in the ways I know, and I can finally go. This process has helped us. You came and you asked and you listened. Nobody has ever asked us before. And that's what the others were saying too, nobody's ever asked us. And so they never had the opportunity to actually tell their stories. The telling, deconstruction, analysis and reconstruction of whānau stories about whakamate as a journey of enlightenment that can move whānau from the house of kahupo to the house of toiora. Te matapeni o te ora, which should be key, is a Māori Indigenous suicide post-vention framework and tool. It's been developed as part of the Waikato-Tainui Titama Hearing the Heart Song research project, and the researchers are now seeking to trial the tool and method with whānau who are more recently bereaved by suicide. So we want to take the tool now and trial it with whānau who have been bereaved for 3 to 12 years, because we went from 12 to 20 years, because what whānau had been bereaved for 20 years, and they'd been sitting in this in the whakamomori space for 20 years since the death of their kids. And so we just think if we can get to whānau earlier and help them by using this tool, then they're not going to spend the next 20 years in the house of going into the house of kahupo. But as well, what we want to do is to assist people who are running suicide support groups. We want to assist them by teaching them, I guess, about facilitation processes, because what we know is that when suicide, this woman Paula, who was in our project, who's running a suicide support group, when we asked her what they do, she goes, oh, we go and we share the tissues, and we pass the tissues around. And so they tell their story and they have a cry, but there's actually no analysis and deconstruction, and, you know, and so they're not making meaning and they're not actually getting through anything, it's just going round and round and round. And so our aim now is to actually get in there and give them a hand, get under their shoulder and hold them up. So that's me, thank you. And they did it